The Galactic Council had reigned supreme for millennia, an alliance of the most advanced alien species in the galaxy. With their overwhelming military might and technological superiority, they maintained a stranglehold over less developed civilizations, forcing them into submission. Earth, one of the younger species to join the galactic stage, had been no exception. Since humanity's first contact, the Council had extracted heavy tributes from Earth, valuable resources, advanced technologies, and even labor, all under the guise of protection. Humanity had adapted to the reality of being an underdog. They were innovative, resourceful, and ambitious, but their progress in space-faring technology remained far behind the dominant species in the Council. For years, Earth had been forced to hand over a significant portion of its wealth just to avoid drawing the ire of its more powerful neighbors. To the Galactic Council, humanity was a minor player, an insignificant species meant to comply without question. The Council's vast fleets, armed with weapons that could vaporize planets, were a constant reminder of the consequences of defiance. As the years passed, the demands grew more severe. Earth's leaders saw their planet being stripped of its potential, its resources funneled away to alien worlds, leaving humanity struggling to keep its own economy afloat. The Council's arrogance knew no bounds. They treated Earth like a well from which they could endlessly draw, never considering the damage they were causing. Their increasing demands reflected their view of humanity, weak, subservient, and easily controlled. But while the Council continued to underestimate Earth, humanity was quietly preparing. Hidden from the watchful eyes of the alien overseers, a small group of scientists, engineers, and military strategists worked on a project that had the potential to change everything. In secret facilities buried deep within the planet, they labored on a massive weapon, the Superdreadnought. It was unlike anything humanity had ever built before, far larger than any existing Earth ship, and armed with experimental technologies that could rival even the most advanced alien weaponry. This colossal vessel was designed for one purpose: to be humanity's last line of defense. The Superdreadnought wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol of defiance, a final act of rebellion against the Galactic Council's oppression. Earth's leaders knew they couldn't fight the Council on their terms. Humanity's fleets were no match for the vast armadas of the galactic powers. But the Superdreadnought wasn't meant for conventional warfare. Its purpose was far more drastic. If the Council ever pushed Earth too far, this ship would be humanity's answer. A weapon so devastating that it could cripple entire planetary systems, taking away the one thing the Council prized above all else: control. As Earth continued to meet the Council's demands, tensions among the planet's leadership grew. Each new tribute felt like a step closer to ruin. The Council didn't care about the strain they were putting on Earth's resources, nor did they see the desperation in humanity's eyes. For the Council, Earth was just one of many lesser civilizations, existing only to serve their interests. But for the people of Earth, every new demand was a reminder of their subjugation, and a call to action. In secret meetings, Earth's highest-ranking officials discussed their future. It was becoming clear that they could not continue under the Council's rule for much longer. The planet was reaching its breaking point, its people restless and angry. They had endured too much for too long, and now, they had a weapon that could change the balance of power. The Superdreadnought was almost ready, but the question remained: when should they use it? Some argued for caution, warning that revealing the Superdreadnought too soon could provoke the Council into launching a preemptive strike. Others believed that humanity was already out of time, that the next tribute demand would push Earth past the point of no return. As the debates raged, the Council's latest demand arrived. This time, it was larger than ever before, a call for massive amounts of rare minerals that would cripple Earth's economy for decades. It was the final insult, the line that could not be crossed. Earth's leaders knew what had to be done. They could no longer afford to play by the Council's rules. They had two choices: submit and watch as their planet withered under the Council's ever-growing greed, or take a stand and risk everything. The Superdreadnought, which had been hidden away for so long, was now their only option. It was time to reveal their hand, to show the galaxy that humanity would no longer be a pawn in the Council's game. The decision to defy the Council was not made lightly. There were no illusions about the consequences. If the Superdreadnought failed, Earth would face immediate annihilation. The Council would send its fleets, and they would wipe out every trace of humanity from existence. But if the Superdreadnought succeeded, it could change everything. For the first time in centuries, humanity would be free from the Council's oppression, free to forge its own destiny in the galaxy. As the ship was prepped for launch, the mood on Earth was tense. The public was unaware of the Superdreadnought's existence, but the growing discontent was palpable. People knew that their planet was being squeezed dry, and many feared that it wouldn't be long before Earth collapsed under the pressure. But the leadership remained calm, determined to keep the secret of the Superdreadnought until the moment was right. And now, that moment had arrived. Earth sent its response to the Galactic Council, a simple message, one that had been carefully crafted to strike at the heart of the Council's arrogance. There would be no more tribute. Earth would not comply. And to back up this defiance, the Superdreadnought was unveiled for the first time. It was massive, a hulking behemoth of metal and power, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen from humanity. Its weapon systems, though still untested in real combat, promised destruction on a scale that no one had expected. The Galactic Council's reaction was predictable. They laughed. They mocked Earth's final act of defiance, confident that their fleets could crush this oversized relic of an outdated age. They saw the Superdreadnought as a foolish attempt by a desperate species to assert power it didn't have. After all, no one had ever stood up to the Council and survived. But Earth's leaders didn't care about the Council's laughter. They knew what was coming. The Superdreadnought had been built for this moment, for the day when humanity would finally say no to its oppressors. They weren't afraid of the Council's reaction. They were ready for it. As the Council prepared to send its fleets to Earth, they had no idea what was waiting for them. The Superdreadnought wasn't just a ship. It was a message. A warning. And when it fired its first shot, the galaxy would finally understand what humanity was capable of. The Council's fleet moved in like a swarm, their warships sleek and deadly as they surrounded the human Superdreadnought. From every angle, they closed in, anticipating an easy victory. Their commanders were certain. This slow-moving monstrosity stood no chance against their superior technology and tactical precision. They had seen this type of defiance before, and every time, the outcome had been the same. It was just a matter of time before the human vessel would be reduced to scrap floating in space. Confidence bordered on arrogance as the Council's ships began their advance. On board the Superdreadnought, however, there was no panic, no frantic scrambling. The ship had been built for this moment, engineered for a very specific purpose. The enemy had underestimated it, and humanity had counted on that. As the Council's fleet drew closer, preparing to launch their assault, the Superdreadnought remained eerily calm, seemingly outmatched and outgunned. The alien ships darted around it like predators circling their prey, their weapons hot and ready to fire. Then, with a suddenness that caught even the most seasoned Council commanders off guard, the Superdreadnought revealed its true nature. A signal pulsed through its massive hull, triggering a chain reaction that activated the weapon systems no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. The Council had expected conventional firepower, a barrage of missiles, lasers, or railguns. What they encountered was something far more devastating. In one calculated strike, the Superdreadnought unleashed its primary weapon. It wasn't designed to target the fleet directly. Instead, it aimed at something far more crucial: the planets and the surrounding systems. A burst of energy, invisible but lethal, rippled out from the Superdreadnought, cascading through space and engulfing entire worlds. It was not an explosion but a disruption, an electromagnetic pulse on a scale never before conceived. Entire planetary grids failed within moments. Planets that had thrived under the Galactic Council's protection, worlds that had never known fear, suddenly went dark. Power grids collapsed, plunging entire civilizations into silence. Communications arrays went dead, cutting off entire planets from the rest of the galaxy. Even the most advanced systems, long considered impenetrable, crumbled under the sheer force of the Superdreadnought's weapon. On these planets, where life had continued without interruption for centuries, chaos reigned. Cities that had been glowing hubs of activity were reduced to nothing but cold, lifeless shadows in an instant. The Council's warships, reliant on their planetary support systems, began to falter. Without the crucial infrastructure that had sustained their dominance, their sleek, nimble ships were reduced to scattered, disconnected vessels. They had no way to coordinate their assault. Their communications were down, their supply lines severed. The once organized fleet that had been so certain of its victory found itself scrambling, unable to execute the precision strikes they had been known for. Panic began to spread throughout the ranks. This was not the battle they had anticipated. What should have been a swift and decisive annihilation of a single ship was now turning into a nightmare of confusion and disorder. The Superdreadnought hadn't just survived, it had rendered their most powerful advantage useless. The vast, interdependent network of planetary infrastructure that the Council had used to control the galaxy was collapsing before their eyes. Alien commanders, once so sure of their superiority, now found themselves cut off from their fleets. Without the ability to communicate or regroup, individual warships were forced to act on their own, making them vulnerable to the very thing they had mocked: human ingenuity. The Superdreadnought, slow and steady, began picking off isolated ships one by one. It wasn't a fast, overwhelming assault, but a systematic dismantling of the Council's forces. On the alien planets thrown into darkness, fear took hold. These were worlds that had known nothing but the security of the Galactic Council. The idea of being vulnerable, of being cut off from the power that had always protected them, was unthinkable. But now, the unthinkable had become reality. Panic gripped populations as they realized they were entirely defenseless. The Council's control had always been absolute, but now, for the first time, the cracks were showing, and those cracks were growing larger by the minute. The Council itself, overseeing the battle from their distant core worlds, was thrown into disarray. What had started as a mere display of force had become a nightmare. Reports from across their territories poured in, planets going dark, fleets losing contact, entire systems falling silent. The Council, so sure of its dominance, now faced the possibility that their grip on the galaxy could be slipping. The human Superdreadnought, once a laughable relic, was now a weapon of terror, systematically dismantling the very systems that had kept the Council in power. On Earth, news of the Superdreadnought's success reached the population. Relief washed over the planet. The gamble had worked. The Council's fleets, once the greatest threat to humanity's existence, were now in chaos. For the first time in living memory, Earth was not the one under siege. The tables had turned, and humanity had struck a blow that sent shockwaves across the galaxy. But while there was relief, there was no celebration yet. Earth's leaders knew that this was only the beginning. The Superdreadnought had dealt a crippling blow to the Council, but the fight wasn't over. The Council was still vast, and their resources were almost limitless. Humanity had scored a victory, but it had also made itself the prime target for retaliation. The Superdreadnought, despite its power, was not invincible. It was slow, vulnerable to a regrouped and concentrated assault. If the Council managed to pull their forces together, the human vessel would face a serious threat. On board the Superdreadnought, the mood was tense. The crew knew that their strike had worked, but they also knew what was coming. The Council would not give up easily. The weapon they had unleashed had only bought them time. Now, they had to be prepared for the inevitable counterattack. Earth's leaders understood the risks, but they were determined. This was no longer just a fight for survival, it was a fight for freedom, and they wouldn't stop until humanity was no longer under the shadow of the Council. The galaxy watched in shock as the fallout from the Superdreadnought's strike continued to unfold. Entire systems, once stable and secure under the Council's control, were now vulnerable and isolated. The power that the Council had wielded for so long had been undermined in a way that no one had thought possible. The Superdreadnought, slow and seemingly outdated, had proven that humanity was not only capable of standing up to the most powerful force in the galaxy, but of reshaping the very fabric of galactic power itself. But the battle was far from over. The Superdreadnought had struck the first blow, but Earth's leaders knew that the full might of the Galactic Council was still out there, and it would be coming for them. the Galactic Council, once the undisputed rulers of the galaxy, was now scrambling to regain control. The chaos caused by the Superdreadnought's strike had left their fleets scattered, their power grid shattered, and their communications in disarray. Commanders, once full of confidence, now found themselves cut off from one another, unable to coordinate a cohesive response. Panic set in as they attempted to regroup and launch a counteroffensive. Desperation fueled their efforts, but the reality was clear: the situation was spiraling out of their control. The Council's remaining fleets, still formidable but now leaderless and fragmented, launched a series of disorganized attacks against the Superdreadnought. Their ships, once known for their precision and swiftness, were now moving erratically, driven by fear more than strategy. Wave after wave of desperate assaults hit the human vessel, but the Superdreadnought stood firm. Its defensive systems, designed with this exact scenario in mind, absorbed and deflected the barrage of alien firepower. Each attempt to bring it down was met with the same outcome: failure. What the Council had once dismissed as a relic of war had now become their greatest adversary. The Superdreadnought's planet-killer weaponry, still as devastating as when it first struck, loomed over them like a silent threat. The Council's fleets found themselves outmatched not just by the technology aboard the human ship, but by its tactical use. Earth's commanders had anticipated these desperate attacks, and they used the ship's immense power to dismantle the Council's remaining forces bit by bit. Each ship that fell only added to the mounting panic within the Council ranks. But the real blow to the Council's power wasn't just the Superdreadnought. Across the galaxy, the cracks in the Council's authority were widening. Word had spread of the Council's weakness, of the human defiance that had sparked a change no one had seen coming. Planets that had lived under the Council's rule for centuries began to rise up, emboldened by humanity's victory. The knowledge that the Council could be challenged, could be beaten, ignited rebellions on worlds that had once been too fearful to resist. In system after system, uprisings began. What had started as whispers of dissent now grew into full-scale revolutions. Species that had long chafed under the Council's oppressive rule seized the moment, overthrowing local governors, capturing Council installations, and declaring their independence. For the first time in living memory, the Council no longer appeared invincible. They had been exposed as fallible, and the galaxy was quick to take advantage of that revelation. As these rebellions spread, the Council's leadership fractured. Some within the Council, seeing the writing on the wall, began to call for negotiations with Earth. They hoped to broker a peace that might allow them to retain some semblance of power, but even these efforts were futile. Others, more stubborn and desperate, called for total war, insisting that the Council's dominance could still be salvaged through sheer force. But it was too late. The moment had passed, and humanity's victory was already in motion. The Council, once united in their arrogance, now crumbled under the weight of their own defeat. The loss of their fleets, the uprisings across their territories, and the disintegration of their command structure left them unable to act. Their once unchallenged authority was reduced to a shadow of its former self. The leaders who had once laughed at humanity now found themselves scrambling for a way out, but none would come. The galaxy had changed, and the Council had no place in this new order. On Earth, the news of the Council's collapse spread like wildfire. For generations, humanity had lived under the threat of annihilation, forced to bow to the whims of a distant and unfeeling Council. Now that threat was gone. The Superdreadnought, once seen as Earth's last desperate gamble, had not only saved the planet but had become the symbol of a new era. Earth had stood up to the most powerful force in the galaxy, and had not just survived, it had triumphed. Celebrations erupted across the planet. Humanity, once viewed as an insignificant player on the galactic stage, had fundamentally changed the balance of power. People who had lived in fear of the Council for so long now stood tall, knowing that they had secured their freedom. The Superdreadnought had delivered them from the Council's oppression, but it had also opened the door to a future that few had ever imagined possible. In the aftermath of the Council's fall, more member species declared their independence. The dissolution of the Council was swift. The centralized power structure that had ruled with an iron grip for so long could no longer hold. Each day, more planets broke away, choosing to govern themselves rather than live under the remnants of the Council's authority. What had once been a galaxy united under one rule was now a patchwork of independent systems, each forging its own path. Humanity, however, did not seize this moment for conquest. They had not fought to dominate the galaxy but to secure their own survival. In the eyes of many, they were not conquerors, they were liberators. Earth had been the catalyst for change, the species that had finally broken the chains of the Council's tyranny. And in doing so, they had inspired others to do the same. As the dust settled and the galaxy began to rebuild, humanity's leaders sent a message to all species. It was a message of peace, one that offered cooperation and mutual respect. Earth had no desire to rule over others. They had fought for their freedom, and now sought to work with any species willing to do the same. The era of subjugation was over, and a new era of collaboration and respect was beginning. But there was one part of the message that was unyielding, a warning to any who might think of returning to the old ways: Earth would never be subjugated again. The message was clear. Humanity had proven that they would not bow to tyranny, and they would not allow it to rise again. Those who sought to impose their will on others, who believed they could control the galaxy through fear and domination, would meet the same fate as the Galactic Council. The balance of power had shifted, and Earth, once a minor player in the grand scheme of things, had emerged as a force for change. The fall of the Galactic Council marked the end of an era, but it also marked the beginning of something new. The galaxy had been given a second chance, a chance to build a future based on equality and cooperation rather than fear and control. And at the heart of it all was Earth, the species that had shown the galaxy what it meant to fight for freedom, and win.